Morning. The dogs got a new toy the other day, so they're a little bit entertained outside.
Unfortunately for me, I can't sit around and play all day. The ground plane is scheduled to leave the station first thing this morning, and I got a flight to catch. I've noticed the fuel in my truck lasts a lot longer now that I live a stone's throw down the road as opposed to 15 miles one way away from the farm. It appears that I've got the tiniest bit of chemical in the bottom of the tanker. About to pick up a fairly large load, so we will deal with that in a second. While that builds up some air, I want you to check something out. Look at this development. They showed up yesterday and poured the footing for the new 48-foot grain bin that hold about 50,000 bushels. I actually have not watched them ever build a grain bin. The last one we built was 10 years ago and I was still in school. Uh-oh, someone's watching me. The ground plane is the arch nemesis of the spray plane. Okay, enough distractions. It's gonna hold about 50,000 bushels dry, according to the bin manufacturer. Excited to see this thing come up. I think they'll probably have to let the concrete cure a little bit, maybe, and then they pour some more, and then I really don't know. Maybe we'll be able to catch them in action. We'll see. It's not really gonna be anything fancy, no leg, no conveyor, nothing like that. It's just gonna be a grain bin with a fan on it. Pick a lot of dry corn, so we don't have a fancy handling setup. Really, we've not had to dry corn or wanted to dry corn in a long time. We are in a typically longer growing season climate where the temperatures stay higher, not a big risk of early frost, so not a lot of motivation to put in a dryer system. You could probably pay for one if you wanted to, but it's just hit or miss around this area. Oh, look at that bad boy. 12-row folding corn head, brand new, ready to roll here in another couple months. Non-chopping, because we ran out of money when we went to the folding. Couldn't afford the chopping system too. If it's feasible, sometimes I like to kind of zero out my tanker first thing in the morning to see how much of a surplus I have in the sprayer. It makes it a little bit less likely that when you're done spraying everything, you got a huge batch of extra chemical in the tank. Sometimes you under apply, especially with fungicide, if you miss a spot here or there, or you spray a percent or two low in terms of total volume. It adds up pretty quickly. I've got 400 gallons in the tank, which is 25 acres worth, so I'll just deduct that from the load I'm about to pick up. I know 25 acres worth seems like a lot, but if you spray 2% low, let's say on 1,000 acres of corn, there's 10 to 20 acres right there, and I also usually carry an extra 10 acres worth in the tanker or on the sprayer just to make sure I don't run out till the end. So that's probably where that came from. Here comes a hell in a tender trailer. They're coming down my way and I'm going up their way to pick up a load. Some of you may have already caught on to this, but I've actually already sprayed quite a bit of fungicide. Over half of our beans have been sprayed and a little less than half of our corn. So I kind of know what I'm doing right now. I was a little unmotivated to run the camera while I was doing that. I was getting a feel for spraying corn fungicide, trying to get a lot of acres covered in a timely manner, trying to beat some rains, ground conditions, and of course my wife literally could go into labor at any point today, tomorrow, the next couple weeks. So the more I get done before that happens, the better. So I got a big chunk done. Now it's time to slow down a little bit and have some fun. Here's our stop to pick up a hot load of corn fungicide, Melon and Chemical, north of Mattoon. They're loading us up. Once traffic clears, we're headed back south to the main farm. This is a big old load of chemical on here. How big is the load, you might ask? Well, of course, it's no larger than the maximum legal allowed load in the state of Illinois. As a family farm who consistently follows the rules of the great state of Illinois and is good friends with the DOT, we would never knowingly or even incidentally break any of those rules, like overloading something. We aren't taking the highway home, though, that's for sure. Yeah, they don't teach you that one at school, folks. That's how you park next to your sprayer when there's not much room. I already need to replace my side tube again. Someone suggested getting Teflon coated tubing. I was having a hard time finding some with 1.25 inch internal diameter because I think that's what I need. And what I did find was rather expensive. I may just start keeping 50 foot of this on hand at all times and just measure the new stick out every time I want to replace it. Not hard to do, just time consuming. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain of your ground plane speaking. We are currently preparing for takeoff. Please remain in your seats because there is a chance of a tile hole. Expecting clear skies with a chance of fog. Let's hit the field. there's that fog I warned you guys about. No way a helicopter, drone, or airplane's beating this. 15 gallons an acre, getting blown into the canopy at 95 PSI. Perfect coverage, fogging it down in there, hopefully getting every leaf. Getting that fungicide on. We're using Syngenta's Mirabis Neo on this field. That is their premium corn fungicide. We're expecting good things. The NORAC height sensors do not work very good in tall corn, so I do have to kind of manually control the boom. I'm canted a little bit on a hillside right now, so it's hard, but for the most part, I shoot to kind of tickle the top of the tassels, lean the corn over a tiny bit as I go over and blow that product down into the leaves. 75 acres in the bag already. Awfully good start to the morning. The high clearance ground rig sprayer is all about coverage. That's the advantage it gives you. The cost it comes at over aerial application is that you may run down a little bit more of your standing crop turning on the ends, or if you get off going down the long rows. And of course you are constrained logistically by the weather. If it rains a lot, you can't run. Airplanes, helicopters, drones are all very versatile, but they cannot even come close to getting the coverage that I'm getting right now. I'm putting on 7.5 times more carrier volume than they are. I'm doing 15, they do 2 gallons an acre, and I'm putting it right on top of the canopy. In my opinion, the only thing that comes close to this might be the drone, if the drone stays low to the ground, but the ones I've seen flying lately look like they're just as high as an airplane or a helicopter. So this is the best choice, and you can't argue that other than maybe the cost. But if you pencil out how much it costs to pay for any aerial application, you can pay for a high clearance sprayer pretty darn quickly, especially if you got a lot of acres of corn. Instead of talking about it, why don't I just hop out here and show you? No, not the corn I run over. You're not supposed to see that part of it. Look at those corn leaves down there. Nice and coated all the way to the ground with this fungicide. There's no way an airplane at 2 gallons an acre is even getting close to this efficacy on the product. 140 acres applied so far. Music of the day is Taylor Swift. Got to keep recirculating different artists or I get bored because I listen to a lot of music. Spotify is my best friend when I'm in a tractor or sprayer cab. Alrighty, Jeff just helped me top it off. We got another 75 to 80 acres worth of product in the tank. We're gonna go ahead and keep spraying some corn. Pretty neat stuff, huh? I got a lot of fun spraying corn fungicide. It's actually pretty enjoyable. 220 acres in the bag. I guess the sprayer is saying that's not true. It says 215 and change. I also left a little bit of a check strip here, so we'll know whether or not the fungicide pass even paid. It's the hard part about applying fungicides, especially on corn. It's not guaranteed to even pay for itself every year. Given the price of the Mirabis Neo, the technical cost of the application, and an adjuvant to help the product stick to the leaves a little bit better, we're looking at about 7 bushels to pay for this, maybe 6, 7, depending on what the market price is today. I haven't looked, but the last couple weeks grain prices have gone in a depressing trend, so I'm sure every day it's costing more bushels to pay for this rather than less. But you get the point. As the name implies, a fungicide exists to fight off fungal pathogens in our crops. Typically we see some rusts, maybe a few different types of wilts and other spots on leaves that can take yield out. Not always guaranteed. It depends on the climate of the year, what blows in from the south, and just the growing season in general. That being said, there are plant health benefits to applying fungicide that are a little bit more intangible than just seeing relief from disease pressure. Loaded back up, headed to my next field. Got a few tag-alongs on the windshield. Part of the tassel rubs off. I sprayed when there's still a dew first thing, so some of that wet material just kind of sticks to everything, especially your windshield. We're gonna hop across the road here, spray an 85-acre field, and then get to it. I do want to address the obvious elephant in the room you may have noticed from the drone footage. Yes, on occasion, I do pull down some corn, especially if some of it's leaning from some strong winds, which we have in a few fields. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm doing my best to stay off the rows, and the firmness of the corn stalks actually do kind of deter the Hagee tires from running over the actual corn rows themselves, but it is still possible. It's a little more challenging because my dad had issues with his planter staying straight, so the Hagee's all over the place, and it's just the cost of doing business at this point. I did say that that is one of the major disadvantages of a ground rig versus an airplane or some kind of aerial application. You're gonna run some over. It's the way it is. Nothing you can do about it. Obviously, I stand to improve a little bit myself. I am still technically a rookie, especially for spraying corn fungicide. So as I continue to hammer on, maybe I'll get a little bit better at staying off of it myself. Or at least I hope so, because I'm spraying some custom acres. I don't want to run over anyone else's crops. Our crops aren't really important. I seem to have sprung some kind of leak over there on my winglet. If it wasn't such a large amount, I wouldn't care, but it wouldn't quite have been out, so I'm not going to check it. This is the only part about spraying corn fungicide I don't enjoy. It's actually kind of hard to work on your boom without pulling out of the field. It's over there somewhere, remember that. Stock strength is way too good on this corn, the ladder won't even go down on it. Okay, right through the fungicide. At least I don't have to worry about athlete's foot. Shooting out in this area somewhere, but I don't know where unless that's broken maybe. Maybe it's just loose. This nozzle body's really wet. That doesn't mean the nozzle body's broken, and it feels kind of firm. So I'm almost wondering if it is coming out of here somewhere. That does have a lot of play in it. See, right in this area? But you look at this side, you push it down, it does not have near as much play. So it's gotta be this thing. I got the gigantic pipe wrench on it. I think it's tight now. It looked like it was just loose. Don't realize how wide this boom is till you gotta walk through the corn to go work on it. Ah, much better. I do prefer my booms without a gigantic leak in them. Got the ends on the field. Time for a little bit of trial work that involves mixing a product into the tank. That's what it looks like. Could be an illicit substance for all you know. Who knows? Maybe a little Colombian Bam Bam gets the corn moving a little better. Probably ought to agitate a little bit. We'll sit here and think about my life choices while we wait. I put in 3 10-acre bags. I've got 1 10-acre bag left to use on a different soybean field to try, and then we'll see what happens come harvest. One issue I see hampering the results of this application on our corn is that we run a pretty heavy nitrogen program for all of our corn fields across the board, and if nitrogen is not our limiting factor, we're probably less likely to see a yield bump from applying any kind of nitrogen sourcing material, whether it be synthetic fertilizer or a bacteria that fixes it. You really need to try something like this in a minimal nitrogen environment, because that's where you'd see the big bump. We're already halfway done with our corn list for the day, so feeling good, feeling confident. On to the next field. Just like clockwork. Okay, we moved on to another field, and I've got a fun one that some of you corn farmers might appreciate. We're gonna do the ultimate side-by-side. We've been spraying Mirvis Neo, and I've got 2 gallons of BASF Veltima to try. This is BASF's flagship corn fungicide. A lot of people use it and like it. We've always been a Syngenta farm, but we're giving it a shot. Got about 36 acres worth here, and I've got 550 gallons in the tank of clean water. So we're gonna get some really good out here on this farm. Veltima going in. Looks exactly like Marty would. As expensive as fungicide is, every drop counts here. Get that nice and mixed up. Uncle Jeff's gonna ride with me for a little bit. We're gonna spray this 35 acres. Jeff needed a break from the heat, considering there's no air conditioning in the semi, so I didn't film when he was in here. I got 30 acres out of the tank I had loaded. That'd be a pretty good trial for Veltima. I'll show you my experiment design here real quick. These are the Veltima strips. Everything else has not been sprayed. That's where I ran out. I may just leave that as a check strip. I don't know. We're gonna fill the rest in with Mirvis Neo. Only thing I think that might skew this data a little bit is the fact that we had those new tile lines ran out here last fall. A few of these passes were on those tile lines, so I don't know if that's going to affect yield data. On top of that, the Mirvis Neo we've been picking up does have an adjuvant in there to help make the product a little stickier, just so it adheres to the leaves better. We get better absorption from the plants and the chemical. I doubt that makes a big difference, but who knows? I mean, if that accounts for a bushel, that's a pretty big deal, so we gotta keep that in mind when we analyze this data later. Finally made it to the last field of the evening. I told my wife that I thought I'd be home a couple of hours ago. Still haven't quite figured out the timeline with spraying. The boss called me yesterday and told me that I needed to get the Hagee out of the way first thing this morning because they're coming to pour the rest of that bin floor, which is pretty important. As if it were an issue though, I'm gonna be out of here before they show up. I got some more to spray. As I looked over the Hagee, I realized I haven't even really described a few very important features of this machine, especially for spraying tall corn. So let me go over those really quick. One of the first things that probably caught your eye is this dinky rear boom. It almost looks like an afterthought, though it does serve a fairly decent purpose. I will note that they're not normally bent like this. I bought this machine used, and when I got it, it came bent. It's not a huge deal that it's bent, although it really does not look that great. If you watched the drone footage earlier in the video, you saw this thing just bounce around as it goes through the field. It's not the most secure thing in the world, and that's why they recommend you take these off when you're not spraying fungicide. Obviously, the next thing you might ask is, what does the rear boom even do? You've got a front boom. Well, the front boom is exactly why you need the rear boom section. When you're spraying corn fungicide, you are running with your boom fairly high. Because of that, there's two implications. First and foremost, when your boom's this high, you're going to get a lot of product on your windshield and ultimately not be able to see very well. That is a very big consideration as to why you need a boom on the back on that back section. The second thing is not only will you get the product on the windshield because it's being applied at windshield height, you also run the risk of rubbing some of it off as it goes under the frame of the Hagee. That's why the boom's on the back, so your windows don't get messy and so you don't rub off the product as it goes under the machine, because all of the corn that goes under this, unless it's exceptionally short, will have to get kind of leaned over as it goes over the top. The plumbing for the rear boom is fairly straightforward. The main feed from the center section control line comes in here. There's this T-valve. If it's flipped one way, it directs the flow to the back of the boom, and if it's flipped the other way, it does the front boom. So later today, when I go back to spraying soybean fungicide, all I've got to do is flip that valve the other way, fire up the front boom, and we're good to go again. The second question that everyone always wonders about farm equipment, are you steering it or is it steering it yourself? Well, it's kind of a hybrid approach for spraying corn fungicide. I have to hold the steering wheel a lot more than I would with other things that are more GPS heavy, although I do have the capabilities to run my straight line auto steer and also make use of these row feelers. The row feelers are nice. They got a little bit of a learning curve to them. To put it in as a professional of a manner as possible, they do leave a little bit to be desired. They're not foolproof. They require some babysitting, and you also need to kind of have a good feel for them to get used to how they run. The row feelers do help keep you off the corn a little bit. The corn itself actually naturally acts as a barrier. You can definitely run it over, but the firmness of those stalks do kind of deter the tire away from them. If you've got enough momentum or you get too far off bearing, you'll run the corn over no problem. I've done it a few times, getting better every field, but it's not to say that I'm not imperfect. I'm probably basing the performance of these row feelers off of the feelers on the corn heads for the row sense. You're asking a little bit more out of these ones in particular because a corn head's not running at 15 mile an hour. We're picking corn at 5 to 7 mile an hour. We were last year with the 8-row corn head on the S780. The Hagee's running 14, 15, maybe even 16 if I can stay off the rows. That's why you've got the row feelers. They work, just don't expect them to do everything. Oh, darn it. Custom applicators beat me to work again. Helena coming down the road. The fun part about spraying tasseled corn is all the pollen and tag-alongs you get on all the nooks and crannies on the sprayer. Probably ought to start blowing this thing off like a combine every night. All right, I'm down to about 200 acres and change of corn left to spray on our farm, and then a good chunk of beans. I may be able to get most of them today, and then we'll see what tomorrow brings. I got a bunch of custom work for the up-hoffs. They've got some corn they want sprayed with the ground rig, which I'm really excited to help them out. And I'm also happy that I've got a little bit of steering wheel time in corn on our farm. That way I can do a superb job for them. Also, big shout out to Jake and Hannah Uphoff that got married this weekend. That's part of the reason I wasn't running on Saturday. I figured there's no reason to work for a couple hours in the morning, take a day off, celebrate a friend's wedding, and wish them the best in their life together. So happy for them. Everyone give them a big congrats in the comments. We're gonna hit the ground running today. Concrete guys are here. Looks like they're gonna be pouring soon. 200 acres over here in Lorna to go, and we've got all of our corn sprayed with fungicide. I'll be switching over to beans this morning. Those spray planes are always watching you when you're in a ground plane. Never too far away from me. It's always fun seeing a two hybrid side-by-side planter split. You can see some unique characteristics from each set of genetics when they're right next to each other like that. Because 12 rows is one and 12 rows is the other, you actually end up with 24 rows of one and then 24 rows of the other. This one's a little taller, a little darker tassel, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to yield more. Looks aren't everything. Okay, we are officially done spraying corn fungicide on our own acres. Like I said, I'm going to do some custom work tomorrow, switching back to beans, hopefully get a lot of our stuff knocked out. I'm going to go ahead and switch the sprayer over to soybean mode now, just because I'm out here in the field and I might as well do it. The crop protectants that we apply on our cornfields are kind of interchangeable with what we apply on our soybeans. Obviously, they're a little more specialized for corn and soybeans, but they're not gonna hurt each other. So I don't need to clean the tank out. I'm close enough to empty that I'll just start putting the soybean stuff in when I get to that field and start spraying. All you gotta do is flip our valve the other way, and the front boom is on and the back boom is off. Should have brought my pipe wrench. The wet boom is kind of twisted a little bit from pushing that corn tassel. Okay, so what I'll do is just shut every section off but the center section, flip her over to manual mode, build the pump up a little bit. I'll lift the boom up so you can watch. Hit the green button. Oh, look at that. Good thing I turned that one on. Looks like it's the closest one to the outside. Nice. Turning the front boom on was less about finding leaks, although it was nice to see that before I got out going in the field, and more just about putting fresh product through this front boom. Even though I've sprayed almost 4,000 acres of corn and soybean fungicide together at this point, there could still be residual corn herbicide baked into the plumbing of this sprayer. I know that seems far-fetched, but it's definitely possible. Corn fungicide is very persistent, and it somehow adheres to the plumbing itself. I don't know if it adheres to stainless steel, but maybe some of the tubing. Best practice is just to always run a little bit of product through the boom before you go to a sensitive crop. Even before I sprayed corn, I ran a little bit of product out in the morning just because if there's clethodim in there, I don't want to hurt our valuable corn crop. And when we're moving over to soybeans, if there's any kind of atrazine or callisto hung up, which is usually the products that kind of are persistent and stick around, don't want them to burn our beans, especially this late in the year. I already did that once, never got around to showing you guys, but it does happen. Even after spraying a whole chunk of acres, and you clean it out, don't hurt the first 1,500 to 1,700 acres of beans. You sit over the weekend, and then you fire it up without running anything through the boom, and you just smoke about 100 foot of beans, because atrazine and callisto can hang around. I knew I had a couple minutes on the tanker by the time we got up to Helen. I got let him got back, so stopped by the Lakeland gas station to get a protein bar and a Coke Zero. Pass the time. Yeah, needless to say, I'm somewhat of a logistical mastermind. I'm here at the field waiting, enjoying my cold Coke Zero, and Jeff is nowhere to be found. So we timed this right. I love it when a plan comes together. Time to fill up. Oh, I sure did miss spraying with the auto boom height control. It's better than the old manual option right here. The row feelers are essentially useless for soybean fungicide application. 20-inch row beans are too big to really row them. You can try, and sometimes you can, but other times you just end up pulling down a row on the way through. What I'm doing here is using my same line that I sprayed the post-emergence herbicide with. I used an RTK guidance system, so the line never moves. It's always in the same place. Fired it back up on the monitor, pulled in here, didn't have to center it or anything. It was ready to go, and I'm just driving the same path, so I'm not really doing a ton of extra damage other than on the ends. My track through the field was already cut once, not really doing a lot more now. We've got another little trial going on here south of Lakeland College. We threw in a Helena product called Cora on about 200 acres. It is a foliar feed nutritional. I believe it's got some nitrogen, maybe some boron and sulfur. I'm not entirely sure. I know it has nitrogen. Something to maybe give these beans that suffered from a dry June and a few heavy ponding events in July a little bit of a jump start heading into the final laps of the season. I've got some pretty good check strips, so I'm excited to see how this performs, just like every other field where I've tried a million different products. We'll figure something out eventually. Well, Jeff, it looks like we may have a problem. There's a rain moving in from the west here pretty shortly. That's not what I was planning on. Pop-up storm to the west. This is a pretty expensive product we're putting on. Okay. So I don't know if we sit and wait. I could technically probably just run, but you know, we're putting on, let's say $30 an acre in chemical alone. Needs at least 30 minutes, if not an hour to dry. The field I just did is probably fine, but that rain's not that far away. So always the logistical hoops you have to jump through with farming. You never know, should you go, should you wait? Probably gonna wait, I think. Jeff, let's go ahead and just take them into the farm, see what the storm does. Because my dogs are outside, I probably need to get them in before it thunderstorms. There's a watch out right now. Okay. I sure hope that spray plane is not headed to go spray ahead of a rain. I know those pilots are really good. I get the feeling though that a lot of them actually don't really care how effective the products they apply are. They just want to get their per acre payment and move on down the road. They're acre eaters, they're good pilots, just not the best crop caretakers. Sprinkles are commencing. I think we're good on what we just put on, but if we'd started something else, we'd really be regretting it. Yeah, that's a fairly convenient way to get home. Don't have to drive into town to check on the dogs. And yes, when I got here, O'Malley, the boy, was in the mail lady's mail vehicle, just sitting in the driver's seat. I wish I would have got a picture.
Murphy, come here, Murph.
That one was all bark, no bite. Rained just enough to make my Hagee look nice and sloppy, but not enough for me to get a good nap, which is not really the way I prefer it. Here we are, though. Back to the field. It's like it never even rained. The major effective difference between our corn and soybean fungicide programs is that we also include an insecticide with our soybean fungicide. We found that insects, specifically hardshell insects, feeding on the soybean foliage and reproductive parts actually causes a pretty good hit in yield, meaning that you can get a pretty quick return on investment by applying the correct insecticides. Corn, the data is kind of hit or miss on insecticides. Some people put them on, but for the most part, the corn seems to be able to outproduce, in terms of vegetative and reproductive material, the amount that is consumed by pest insects, other than extreme cases. You hate to see something like that after an extremely droughty period. That's water damage. Didn't think we'd see any of that this year. Well, it's about time I quit for the night. There's a rain about 30 minutes away, and the dew also happens to be set in. So either way, it's a lose-lose for me. I didn't quite get everything done today that I wanted to, although I was only off by a little bit. I know, I'm like a broken record with that line. I always have bigger ambitions than I do have talents. So I get into this predicament a lot. You can see the thunderstorm to the west there rolling up on us. I'm spraying a little bit right now just because I need to get some product out of the tank so I can hit full road gear. I have a farm over at Tower Hill, which is 40 miles away, that needs sprayed possibly first thing tomorrow if it doesn't rain that much. And I don't really want to travel at 20 miles an hour. I prefer my top end speed of 34, if you could imagine that. Wow, I should be a meteorologist. I'm 2 for 2 on pulling the plug at the right time today. The good news is that I get to go see my family earlier than expected. The bad news is that I got to walk through the rain. Small price I'm willing to pay. I was wondering why I couldn't hear Jeff on the Midland radio. I lost my antenna to a tree. That's no fun. Alrighty folks, I'm headed inside for the evening. I'm probably not gonna check in for a few days regardless of what this rain does. If ground conditions are not too damp first thing in the morning, I'm gonna be hitting the rest of our soybeans and then running some custom corn fungicide. Not gonna carry the camera for that. I'll definitely be sure to check in with you all in the near future. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, I greatly appreciate every single one of you continuing to tune in and support the channel. Your viewership means the world to me. I'll catch you all in the next episode. Until then, make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment down below if you have any questions. You know I love to talk about farming. Have a great day, everyone. Peace!